The scent of salt and damp earth still clings to the edges of my memory, sharp and insistent, like a persistent whisper. I can almost feel the gritty sand beneath my aging fingers as I trace the faded lines of a photograph, a relic from a time I thought was immutable, a time before the whisper turned into a roar. The faces in the picture smile with an unguarded joy that now feels like a phantom limb, a sensation I can still recall but can no longer truly grasp. That resort, shimmering like a mirage on the glossy pages of a travel magazine, had become a silent battleground. My daughter, bless her well-meaning but often thoughtless heart, had pointed to it with such longing, such youthful certainty. "Oh, Mama," she had said, her voice bright with dreams. "Imagine waking up to that view." And then, the words that snagged in my heart like a hidden barb. "It is probably too far for you now, though. All that traveling. You are not as young as you used to be." Her words were meant with affection, I know that. But they landed with the unexpected weight of a judgment, a gentle closing of a door I did not even realize was creaking shut. It was not the destination itself that stung, but the casual dismissal, the assumption of my limitations. It was the unspoken message that my adventures were over, my horizons shrinking with each passing year. That night, the silence in my house felt different. It was no longer the comfortable quiet of a long-lived life, but a hollow echo of unspoken assumptions. I looked at my reflection in the darkened window, the lines etched around my eyes telling stories she had not bothered to read. Was I truly fading, becoming a background character in my own life? Was my spirit, which still felt vibrant and yearning, truly tethered by the calendar? A flicker of defiance, a spark I had almost forgotten I possessed, ignited within me. It was a quiet ember at first, a hesitant warmth against the chill of those words. But as the days turned into weeks, that ember began to glow, fueled by a lifetime of quiet strength and a sudden, sharp awareness of my own worth. What if I was not finished? What if my story still had chapters waiting to be written? Adventures yet to be lived? What if the map of my life held destinations no one else could imagine for me? Before we jump back in, tell us where you are tuning in from. And if this story touches your heart, please subscribe, because tomorrow I have saved something truly special just for you. My name is Eleanor. I am 65 years old, and for many years, my life has unfolded with the gentle predictability of the changing seasons. My home, a comfortable 2-story house with a sprawling garden, has been my sanctuary since Robert and I bought it as young newlyweds. The walls hold the echoes of laughter, the imprints of growing hands, and the quiet comfort of shared evenings. Each morning begins with the soft chirping of the sparrows outside my bedroom window. I rise before the sun fully crests the horizon, the quiet hours my own. I make a cup of Earl Grey tea, its familiar aroma a comforting ritual, and sit in my sunroom, watching the garden awaken. The roses Robert planted still bloom each spring, their velvety petals a vibrant testament to a love that time cannot fully erase. My days are filled with small, meaningful tasks. I tend to my garden, finding solace in the feel of the earth between my fingers. I read, losing myself in the worlds crafted by others. I volunteer at the local library twice a week, surrounded by the comforting scent of old books and the quiet murmur of readers. My son, Thomas, his wife, Rebecca, and my 2 grandchildren, Noah and Lily, live nearby. They are the bright threads woven into the tapestry of my days. Thomas, so like his father in his steady kindness, calls me every few days. Rebecca is a whirlwind of energy, always busy with work and the children's activities. Noah, at 10, is a curious and bright boy, full of questions about the world. Lily, my sweet granddaughter of 7, still loves to sit on my lap while I read her stories. Outwardly, my life is calm, settled. There is a quiet rhythm to my days, a sense of peace that comes with age and a life well lived. Yet, beneath this placid surface, there are subtle undertones, quiet acknowledgments of a changing landscape. Thomas and Rebecca are busy, their lives full. My role in their family, while cherished, feels increasingly on the periphery. I am the steady hand, the comforting presence, but the decisions, the adventures, belong to them. Since Robert passed away 5 years ago, a quiet loneliness sometimes settles in the evenings, a space beside me on the sofa that remains perpetually empty. I fill it with books, with the soft glow of the television, but the absence is always there, a gentle ache in the quiet of the house. I often look at old photographs, Robert's smiling face a familiar comfort. We had planned so much for our retirement, travels we dreamed of taking, experiences we longed to share. His sudden illness stole those dreams, leaving me with a house full of memories and a heart that still misses him deeply. Sometimes I feel a subtle shift in how my family interacts with me, a gentle protectiveness that borders on dismissal. They mean well, I know they do. But there are moments, fleeting but sharp, when I feel like a fragile teacup, handled with excessive care, placed safely on a shelf, admired from a distance, but no longer truly a part of the everyday. I tell myself, it is the natural order of things. Children grow, they build their own lives. Parents age, they become the keepers of memories. Yet, a small, persistent voice within me sometimes whispers a different story. A story where my own adventures are not yet over, where my own desires still hold weight. I could feel something changing, a faint tremor beneath the surface of our everyday lives. The subtle shift began with a conversation about their upcoming summer vacation. Thomas and Rebecca were excitedly discussing potential destinations with Noah and Lily, their voices filled with the infectious enthusiasm of impending adventure. They spread glossy brochures across my kitchen table, vibrant images of sun-drenched beaches and ancient ruins. "We are thinking of that resort in the Maldives," Rebecca said, her finger tracing a picture of an overwater bungalow perched above turquoise waters. Lily would adore the snorkeling, and Noah is desperate to try windsurfing. I smiled, genuinely happy for their excitement. "It looks absolutely beautiful," I said, admiring the crystal-clear lagoons in the photograph. "You will all have a wonderful time." Then Lily piped up, her eyes wide with wonder. "Grandma, have you ever been anywhere like that?" Before I could answer, Thomas chuckled softly. "Those kinds of places are a bit far-flung for Grandma now, sweetie. All that flying can be tiring." His tone was gentle, matter-of-fact, but the words hung in the air, a subtle pronouncement of my limitations. It was not said with malice, I know. That. It was spoken with the casual certainty of someone who believes they know what is best, what is possible, for another person. A small prickle of something I could not quite name settled beneath my skin. It was not anger. Not exactly. More like a faint surprise, a quiet questioning of the boundaries they were so casually drawing around my life. Later that week, Rebecca asked if I could look after the children for a few days while they went on a short weekend trip. Of course, I readily agreed. I love spending time with Noah and Lily, their energy and laughter filling the quiet spaces in my house. But then, Rebecca added, almost as an afterthought, we were thinking of going to that little spa resort, the one about an hour from here. It is supposed to be very relaxing. You would probably enjoy it, Mum, but the drive might be a bit much for you on your own. Again, the words were delivered with kindness, a consideration for my well-being. But the underlying message was clear. My capabilities were being assessed, my boundaries defined by them, not by me. These were small instances, seemingly insignificant on their own. A casual comment about travel, a gentle suggestion about what I could or could not manage. But they accumulated, like tiny pebbles dropped into a still pond, creating subtle ripples in the calm waters of my days. I found myself replaying these conversations in my mind, searching for a hidden meaning, a reason for this subtle shift in their perception of me. Was I truly becoming so frail, so limited in their eyes? Did they see me as someone whose adventures were confined to the familiar walls of my home and the predictable routines of my days? I tried to dismiss these feelings as the overthinking of an aging woman, the tendency to read too much into innocent remarks. But a small seed of unease had been planted, a faint tremor beneath the surface of our everyday lives. The unease lingered, a quiet hum beneath the surface of my thoughts. I found myself watching Thomas and Rebecca more closely, observing their interactions with me, searching for further subtle cues. There was a dinner a few nights later at their house. As I helped Rebecca clear the table, she gently took a plate from my hand. "Don't worry about that, Mum," she said with a soft smile. "You just sit down and relax. You have done enough today." Again, the kindness was there, the thoughtfulness. But it felt different. It felt like I was being relegated to the role of a guest, someone to be looked after, rather than an active participant in the life of my own family. Later, as Thomas and I sat in the living room, catching up on the week's events, he mentioned a new walking trail he had discovered. "It is quite challenging, Mum," he said, his tone almost apologetic. "Lots of steep inclines. Definitely not one for you. I had always enjoyed walking, even now. My daily stroll through the garden was a cherished part of my routine. But his words painted a picture of me as someone incapable of even a moderately challenging walk, someone whose physical world was shrinking. These small acts of gentle exclusion, these well-meaning but limiting assumptions, began to cast a shadow in my heart. I felt a growing confusion, a sense of being subtly redefined by those I loved. Was this how they truly saw me? As someone whose capabilities were steadily diminishing? I remembered other instances, small moments I had previously brushed aside. Rebecca always insisted on carrying the heavier grocery bags when we went shopping, together. Thomas would often preemptively offer help with tasks I had always managed on my own. Perhaps I was overreacting. Perhaps they were simply being considerate, thoughtful children looking out for their aging mother. But a nagging feeling persisted, a sense that something more was at play, a subtle shift in the dynamic of our family. I tried to talk to my old friend Martha about it during our weekly phone call. Martha, a woman of similar age, has always been fiercely independent. "They mean well, Eleanor," she said, her voice warm and reassuring. "But sometimes, our children forget that we are still ourselves, with our own desires and capabilities. They see the gray hairs and the wrinkles, and make assumptions." Her words offered a small measure of comfort. a validation of my feelings, but the confusion remained. Why this sudden shift? Had I unknowingly given them reason to believe I was becoming so frail? I looked back at my life, at the quiet strength that had carried me through challenges, through the loss of Robert, through the everyday demands of life. Had that strength truly diminished so much that my own children now perceived me as someone needing constant care and gentle limitations? The shadows in my heart deepened, a quiet unease that I could not shake. I longed for the easy camaraderie we once shared, the unspoken understanding that transcended age and assumptions. I could feel myself retreating slightly, a quiet withdrawal as I grappled with this unsettling new perception of myself within my own family. Just when the shadows in my heart felt like they might consume the light, Thomas did something that made me pause, that offered a fragile glimmer of reassurance. He came over one afternoon, not with Rebecca and the children, but alone. He brought with him a small bouquet of my favorite lilies, their white petals unfurling like delicate promises. "I just wanted to check in on you, Mum," he said, his smile warm and genuine. "Rebecca and I were talking, and we realized we have not spent much quality time with you lately. Just the two of us." We sat in the sunroom, sipping tea and talking. He told me about his work, his challenges and triumphs. He asked about my garden, about the book I was reading. He listened attentively, his gaze steady and caring. He even mentioned the walking trail again, but this time his tone was different. "Perhaps one day, when the weather is a bit cooler, we could try a small section of it together, Mum," he suggested. "At your own pace, of course." His words were like a gentle balm to my wounded spirit. It was as if he had sensed my unease, my feeling of being subtly sidelined, and was making an effort to bridge that gap. Later that week, Rebecca called, her voice apologetic. "Mum, I am so sorry if I sounded dismissive about the Maldives. Of course, you could travel there if you wanted to. It was thoughtless of me to say that." Her apology felt sincere, her words acknowledging my autonomy. It was a small gesture, but it carried a weight of understanding. Noah drew me a picture of the Maldives resort, all bright blues and cheerful sunshine. "Maybe one day we can all go together, Grandma," he declared, his eyes full of innocent enthusiasm. These moments, these small acts of kindness and acknowledgement were like rays of sunlight breaking through the clouds. They made me want to believe that my earlier unease was just a misunderstanding, a result of my own oversensitivity. I wanted to trust them, to believe that their intentions were pure, that their gentle limitations were born out of love and concern, not a diminishing view of my capabilities. I reached for that reassurance, wanting to embrace the familiar warmth of my family, to dispel the shadows that had begun to gather. I told myself that I was loved, that I was valued, that my place in their lives was secure. But even as I allowed myself to feel a sense of relief, a tiny, almost imperceptible doubt lingered at the edges of my heart. The earlier incidents, the subtle pronouncements of my limitations, still echoed in my memory. Could I truly dismiss them as mere misunderstandings? Or were they glimpses of a deeper, perhaps unconscious shift in how my family perceived me? I wanted to trust them. I truly did. But the seeds of unease had been sown, and they were proving difficult to uproot entirely. A small, persistent voice within me whispered that perhaps things were not quite as they seemed, that the calm waters might still hold hidden currents. The warning came unexpectedly, wrapped in the familiar warmth of an old friendship. Martha and I have been friends since our school days, a bond forged through shared laughter, whispered secrets, and the quiet understanding that comes with decades of knowing someone. We speak on the phone every Sunday evening, a ritual that has sustained us through the ebb and flow of life. This particular Sunday, Martha's voice held a different tone, a subtle undercurrent of concern. "Eleanor, dear," she began, her usual cheerful greeting replaced by a more serious note. "I ran into Margaret at the market yesterday. Margaret is a distant relative of Robert's, a woman known for her sharp observations and an occasional tendency towards gossip, though her intentions are usually well-meaning." "Oh?" I replied, a flicker of curiosity mixed with a touch of apprehension. Margaret's news was rarely entirely neutral. "Yes," Martha continued. "She mentioned that she had seen Thomas and Rebecca looking at some rather expensive properties recently. Apparently they were discussing needing something bigger, perhaps with more space for everyone." My brow furrowed slightly. Thomas and Rebecca's house was a comfortable size. They had a lovely garden, and the children had their own spacious rooms. The thought of them moving had not even crossed my mind. "That is interesting," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. "They have not mentioned anything to me." Martha hesitated for a moment. "Well," she said slowly, "Margaret did say something else. Something about them mentioning needing to find a place with an annex. For you, Eleanor." The word hung in the air between us, heavy with unspoken implications. An annex. A separate dwelling attached to their house. The image that sprang to my mind was of a small, self-contained unit, a place for me to live, separate but nearby. A chill ran down my spine, a cold premonition that had nothing to do with the evening air. It was the confirmation of a subtle fear I had been trying to ignore, the unspoken assumption that my independence was waning, that my future was being planned without my full participation. "Margaret might have misunderstood," I said, my voice sounding strangely distant even to my own ears. "Perhaps they were talking about something else." "Perhaps," Martha replied gently. "But knowing Margaret, she usually has a kernel of truth in her stories. Eleanor, are you all right with this? Have they discussed this with you?" "No," I admitted quietly. "They have not said a word." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken understanding. Martha knew me well enough to sense my distress, the quiet turmoil that Margaret's words had stirred within me. "Eleanor," she said softly, "please be careful. Sometimes the people we love the most can make decisions for us, thinking they know what is best, without truly understanding what we need." Her words were a stark warning, a voice cutting through the silence of my denial. They resonated with the unease I had been feeling, the subtle hints and assumptions that had been accumulating. I thanked Martha for her concern, my mind reeling. The thought of living in an annex, separate from my own home, felt like a gentle but firm severing of my independence, a quiet confinement. That night, sleep eluded me. Martha's words echoed in my mind, intertwining with the memory of Thomas's casual dismissal of the Maldives and Rebecca's gentle suggestions about my limitations. A cold knot of apprehension tightened in my stomach. Was my life being quietly rearranged without my knowledge or consent? Were the decisions about my future being made behind closed doors, based on assumptions about my age rather than my actual capabilities? The warning from Martha was like a sudden gust of wind, shaking the carefully constructed calm of my life. It forced me to confront the unsettling feeling that had been growing within me, the sense that I was slowly being relegated to the sidelines. The comfortable rhythms of my days now felt laced with a subtle tension, a quiet anticipation of something I did not yet fully understand, but instinctively felt I should be wary of. Despite Martha's warning, a part of me desperately wanted to dismiss it, to cling to the comfort of denial. Margaret's information was, after all, second-hand, filtered through her own interpretations and potential biases. Perhaps she had, indeed, misunderstood. Perhaps Thomas and Rebecca were simply exploring their options, as young families often do. The mention of an annex could have been entirely unrelated to me, a fleeting thought about a guest room or a future need. It was easier to believe this version of events, to tuck Martha's words away in a corner of my mind and try to forget them. Confronting the possibility that my children were making significant life decisions that directly involved me without my input was deeply unsettling. It stirred a fear of losing control, of being seen as a burden rather than a cherished member of the family. So, I busied myself with my usual routines. I spent extra time in the garden, the familiar scent of the roses and the feel of the soil a soothing balm to my troubled thoughts. I lost myself in my books, allowing the stories of others to temporarily eclipse my own anxieties. I even baked Thomas's favorite apple pie, a small gesture of normalcy, a way of reinforcing the familiar patterns of our family life. When Thomas called, I kept the conversation light, focusing on the grandchildren's latest antics and the mundane details of my week. I avoided any mention of Margaret or her unsettling information. I told myself that if there was something important to discuss, they would bring it up themselves. Rebecca came over with Lily one afternoon, and we spent a pleasant hour playing in the garden. Lily chattered about school and her friends, her innocent joy a welcome distraction. Rebecca was warm and affectionate, her behavior giving no hint of any secret plans or impending changes. As she was leaving, Rebecca hugged me tightly. "We love you, Mum," she said, her voice soft. "We just want you to be happy and comfortable." Her words, meant to reassure, paradoxically fueled my denial. If they were planning to move me into an annex, surely they would not be expressing such sentiments with such apparent sincerity. It had to be a misunderstanding. Margaret must have gotten it wrong. I clung to these small reassurances, these outward displays of affection and normalcy. I wanted to believe that my family loved me, valued me, and would never make such a significant decision about my life without my full involvement. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and despite my best efforts, it continued to sprout in the quiet corners of my mind. Martha's warning echoed in the silence of my evenings, a persistent whisper that refused to be entirely silenced. I found myself watching Thomas and Rebecca more intently again, searching for subtle clues, for any flicker in their eyes or shift in their tone that might betray a hidden agenda. The comfort of denial was a fragile shield, and I could feel the sharp edges of my unease pressing against it, threatening to break through. I tried to tell myself that I was simply being paranoid, that age was making me overly sensitive and prone to suspicion. But the feeling persisted, a cold knot of apprehension that refused to dissolve. I could not shake the sense that the calm surface of my life was concealing something significant, something that would inevitably ripple outwards and change everything. It was during a casual Sunday lunch at their house that I began to notice subtle shifts in their non-verbal communication, unspoken truths revealed in fleeting glances and hesitant smiles. Thomas, usually so open and direct, would sometimes avoid my gaze when I spoke about my future or my plans. If I mentioned a new book I wanted to read, or a local event I was considering attending, his eyes would flick away momentarily, a subtle hesitation before he offered a generic, non-committal response. Rebecca, typically so warm and engaging, would sometimes offer a smile that did not quite reach her eyes. It was a polite, almost perfunctory expression, lacking the genuine warmth I was accustomed to. There were moments when I would catch her exchanging a quick, almost imperceptible glance with Thomas, a silent communication that excluded me. One afternoon, as I was helping Lily with her homework, Thomas and Rebecca had a brief conversation in the kitchen. Their voices were low, but I caught a few words. The arrangements. Easier for everyone. We need to be practical. When I entered the kitchen, their conversation abruptly ceased, and their expression seemed a little too bright, a little too forced. These small, seemingly insignificant moments began to accumulate, painting a picture that contradicted their reassuring words. Their body language, the subtle shifts in their demeanor, suggested a hidden undercurrent, a reality that was not being spoken aloud. I started paying closer attention to their interactions with each other as well. There were times when they seemed unusually close-lipped around me, their conversations falling silent when I entered the room. They would sometimes speak in hushed tones, their heads bent together, creating a sense of intimacy that felt exclusionary. The way they looked at me also began to change. There was a new element in their gazes, a mixture of what seemed like concern and a certain pity. It was as if they were already viewing me through the lens of my perceived limitations, seeing me as someone who needed to be managed and cared for in a specific way. This unspoken truth in their eyes was more unsettling than any direct words could have been. It suggested a preconceived notion of my capabilities and my future, a plan that was being formulated without my genuine input. I tried to rationalize these observations, to tell myself that I was being overly sensitive, that I was reading too much into innocent gestures. But the feeling persisted, a growing certainty that there was something they were not telling me, something significant that was shaping their interactions with me. The warmth and openness that had once characterized our family dynamic felt subtly diminished, replaced by a carefulness, a guardedness that created a palpable distance. I longed for the days when our communication was effortless, when unspoken glances were filled with affection and understanding, not with the weight of unspoken plans. The silence between us was becoming heavier, filled with the unspoken truths that flickered in their eyes, and the unanswered questions that churned within my own heart. I knew, with a growing sense of certainty, that the time for gentle denial was drawing to a close. The subtle ripples in the calm waters of my life were beginning to coalesce into something larger, something that would inevitably require a direct confrontation. The weight of the unspoken truths had become too heavy to bear. The subtle glances, the hesitant smiles, the hushed conversations, they had created a fog of uncertainty that was clouding my days and unsettling my nights. I knew I needed clarity, a direct answer to the questions that were swirling in my mind. I decided to speak to Thomas first. He had always been the more direct one, the one who found it difficult to hide his feelings. I called him and asked if he could come over for a cup of tea, just the two of us. When he arrived, he seemed a little preoccupied, his usual easygoing demeanor replaced by a subtle air of nervousness. He fidgeted with his teacup and avoided my direct gaze. "Thomas," I began, my voice calm but firm. "Martha mentioned that she had heard you and Rebecca were looking at new houses." He looked up sharply, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. "Oh," he said, his tone a little too casual. "Yes, we have been looking online, just casually. With the children growing, we thought we might need more space eventually." And Martha also mentioned something about an annex, I continued, watching his reaction closely. His eyes darted away again. He took a long sip of his tea before answering. Well, he said slowly, we were just exploring all possibilities. You know, for the future. It is good to plan ahead. His answer felt evasive, the words carefully chosen but lacking genuine conviction. He was not denying it outright, but he was certainly not being forthcoming. Thomas, I said, my voice softening slightly, if you are making plans that involve me, I would appreciate being a part of those conversations. I feel like there is something you are not telling me. He finally met my gaze, a look of discomfort in his eyes. Mum, he said, we just want what is best for you. We have been worried about you, living here on your own. It can be lonely, and the house is a lot to manage. I am managing perfectly well, I replied, a touch of defensiveness creeping into my voice. And I am not lonely. I have my friends, my garden, my activities. But as you get older, Mum, he began, his voice trailing off. As I get older, I still have the right to make my own decisions about my life. I interrupted gently but firmly. If you are considering a move and thinking about me living with you in an annex, I need to know about it. I deserve to be included in that discussion. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. It was just an idea, Mum. We were just thinking about the future, trying to be responsible. His explanation felt flimsy, a way to deflect without truly addressing my concerns. He had not denied the existence of the idea, but he had also not offered any genuine transparency. Later that week, I spoke to Rebecca. She was more adept at deflection, her responses smoother and more practiced. When I brought up the topic of moving, she was all airy generalities about future possibilities and the need to consider all options. She praised my independence and assured me that they would never do anything that I was not comfortable with. But her words lacked the ring of truth. Her eyes, though bright and friendly, held a guardedness that mirrored Thomas's discomfort. I could sense a carefully constructed narrative, a story they were telling themselves, and perhaps trying to tell me, that did not fully align with reality. My doubt grew stronger with each evasive answer, each carefully worded reassurance that lacked genuine substance. The fog of uncertainty was not lifting. Instead, it felt like it was thickening, obscuring the truth even further. I knew that I had not gotten the clarity I sought. Their evasiveness only confirmed my growing suspicion that there were indeed plans being made, decisions being considered, that directly impacted my life, and I was being kept in the dark. The unanswered questions hung in the air between us, heavy and unresolved, fueling my inner turmoil and solidifying my resolve to uncover the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it might be. Sleep became a restless companion. The quiet hours of the night, which had once been a time for peaceful reflection, were now filled with the relentless churning of my thoughts. I replayed every conversation with Thomas and Rebecca, every subtle glance, every carefully chosen word, searching for the hidden meanings, the unspoken truths. Martha's warning echoed in my mind, intertwining with their evasive answers. The image of a small, separate annex, a life lived adjacent but not fully integrated, haunted my waking hours and seeped into my dreams. I found myself analyzing every interaction, every suggestion they made. Was their insistence on helping me with tasks truly out of concern, or was it a subtle way of reinforcing their perception of my diminishing capabilities? Was their talk of future planning a genuine consideration for my well-being, or a veiled way of preparing me for a change I had not agreed to. The turmoil within me grew. I felt a sense of isolation, a growing distance from the people I loved most. The easy intimacy we once shared had been replaced by a carefulness, a guardedness that made genuine connection feel elusive. I longed to confide in someone, to share the burden of my anxieties. But who could I truly trust? Martha had offered her support, but she was not privy to the daily nuances of my interactions with Thomas and Rebecca. Sharing my suspicions with other friends felt like a betrayal, a breach of the familial bond, especially when I still held onto a sliver of hope that I was simply overreacting. So, I carried the weight of my thoughts in silence, the unanswered questions circling endlessly in my mind. I would lie in bed at night, the darkness amplifying my anxieties, replaying conversations like a broken record, searching for a logical explanation, a way to reconcile their words with my growing unease. Thought about Robert. What would he have said? He had always been fiercely protective of my independence, valuing my strength and resilience. I imagined his quiet disapproval of any attempt to diminish my autonomy. His memory became a source of strength, a reminder of the woman I had always been. The woman I still was beneath the layers of their well-meaning but potentially misguided concern. The more I thought, the more the pieces seemed to fit together, forming a disquieting picture. Their subtle suggestions about my limitations, their evasiveness when questioned about their future plans, Martha's information about the annex, it all pointed towards a scenario where my life was being quietly reorganized without my full consent or understanding. The sleepless nights stretched into anxious days. I found it difficult to concentrate, my mind constantly returning to the same unsettling questions. The quiet rhythms of my days, which had once brought comfort, now felt like a fragile facade, a temporary calm before a potential storm. I knew I could not continue in this state of uncertainty. The turmoil within was eroding my peace of mind, creating a growing chasm between me and my family. I needed to find a way to break through the fog, to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The time for quiet contemplation was over. The time for action was approaching. The inability to shake the feeling of unease, coupled with the evasiveness of Thomas and Rebecca, settled into a quiet pain within me. It was not a sharp, acute agony, but a dull, persistent ache, a constant reminder of the growing distance between me and my children. The joy seemed to drain from my daily routines. The vibrant colors of my garden appeared muted. The comforting scent of my tea felt less soothing. Even the laughter of Noah and Lily, usually a bright melody in my life, now carried a subtle undercurrent of sadness, a reminder of the potential changes that loomed. I found myself withdrawing slightly, retreating into the quiet solitude of my home. I spent hours gazing out of the window, watching the rain fall, the droplets mirroring the tears that sometimes welled in my eyes. It was a private grief, a sorrow unseen by others, a silent mourning for the easy trust and open communication that seemed to be slipping away. The weight of my suspicions felt heavy, a burden I carried alone. I longed to share it, to unburden my heart. But the fear of being wrong, of misinterpreting their intentions, kept me silent. I did not want to create unnecessary conflict or sow seeds of distrust if my anxieties were unfounded. Yet the silence itself became a form of suffering. The unspoken questions hung in the air, creating a tension that permeated my interactions with Thomas and Rebecca, even when we were trying to maintain a semblance of normalcy. There were moments when I would look at them, at the faces I had loved since they were children, and feel a pang of deep sadness. Had our relationship truly shifted so much? Were their perceptions of me so different from the vibrant, capable woman I still felt myself to be? The injustice of it all settled heavily upon me. I had always been a loving and supportive mother, always putting their needs before my own. The thought that they might now be making significant decisions about my life without my genuine input felt like a betrayal of that lifelong devotion. I tried to find solace in my memories of Robert, but even those cherished moments were tinged with a sadness, a longing for his steady presence, his unwavering support. I knew he would have stood by me, would have ensured that my voice was heard. The quiet pain I felt was a lonely one. It was the sorrow of a heart that felt misunderstood, a spirit that felt subtly confined. It was the ache of a love that felt like it was being tested, stretched thin by unspoken assumptions and potential hidden plans. I knew that this quiet suffering could not continue indefinitely. The weight of my sorrows was becoming too heavy to bear in silence. I needed to find a way to voice my concerns, to seek clarity and understanding, even if it meant facing a difficult truth. The time for gentle withdrawal was over. The need for honest confrontation was growing stronger with each passing day. The quiet pain had reached a point where it could no longer be contained. The weight of my unanswered questions had become a physical burden, pressing down on me, stealing my energy and my peace. I knew I needed to confront Thomas and Rebecca again, but this time with a newfound strength and determination. The gentle inquiries had yielded only evasiveness. Now, I needed to be direct. I called Thomas and asked if they could both come over. I wanted to speak to them together, so there could be no misinterpretations or conflicting accounts. When they arrived, there was a noticeable tension in the air. They seemed to sense that this was not just another casual visit. I sat them down, in the living room, taking a deep breath to steady my nerves. "I need to talk to you both about the future," I began, my voice calm but firm. "I have the distinct impression that you have been discussing plans that involve me, and I have not been included in those conversations." Thomas shifted uncomfortably in his seat, avoiding my gaze. Rebecca's smile was tight, her eyes guarded. "Mum," Thomas began, "we have just been thinking about what might be best for you down the line. I understand that you believe you have my best interests at heart," I interrupted, "but making assumptions about what is best for me without my full input is not acceptable. Martha told me that she heard you were looking at houses with an annex, the somme." Color drained slightly from Rebecca's face. Thomas finally met my gaze, a look of mild surprise mixed with apprehension. "Mum, Margaret sometimes exaggerates things," Rebecca said quickly, her tone overly bright. "We were just looking at different options for the future as a family. Nothing is set in stone. But the idea of an annex, a separate living space for me attached to your house, that has been discussed, hasn't it?" I pressed, my voice unwavering. Heavy silence filled the room. Thomas and Rebecca exchanged a quick glance. "Yes, Mum," Thomas admitted finally, his voice low. "It was something we considered. We were worried about you being alone here, the upkeep of the house." "Worried?" I echoed, a knot of hurt tightening in my chest. "Or were you perhaps thinking it would be more convenient for you? More practical?" Rebecca's eyes flickered with defensiveness. "Of course we were worried, Mum. We love you. We just thought... You thought you knew what was best for me without asking me how I felt, without considering what I want." My voice, though still calm, held a sharp edge of disappointment. This is my home. Robert and I built a life here. I am happy. Here, I am capable of managing my own life. But Mum, as you get older, Thomas began again, the familiar refrain. My age does not define my capabilities or my desires, I countered, my voice rising slightly. I am not a fragile object to be placed carefully on a shelf. I am a woman who has lived a full life, who still has interests and passions and the ability to make her own choices. The silence that followed was thick with unspoken emotions. Thomas and Rebecca looked at each other, a silent acknowledgement of the truth of my words hanging in the air. We just wanted to make sure you were taken care of, Rebecca said softly, her tone finally losing its defensive edge. And I appreciate your concern, I replied, my voice softening slightly as well. But being taken care of should not mean being stripped of my independence or my autonomy. It should mean respecting my wishes and including me in decisions that directly impact my life. The confrontation had been difficult, the air heavy with unspoken assumptions and hurt feelings, but it felt necessary, a breaking of the dam of evasiveness that had been building between us. The truth, though uncomfortable, was finally out in the open. The silence that now filled the room was different. It was no longer the silence of unspoken secrets, but the silence of a difficult truth acknowledged. I had asked for an answer, and though it was not the answer I had hoped for, it was an answer nonetheless. The fog of uncertainty had begun to dissipate, replaced by the clearer, albeit painful light of reality. In the days that followed the confrontation, the full weight of their intentions began to sink in. The pieces of the puzzle, the subtle clues I had been collecting, finally formed a complete and unsettling picture. Their worry, their gentle suggestions about my limitations, their furtive glances and hushed conversations, they were all part of a plan, a well-intentioned but ultimately misguided attempt to secure my future in a way that they deemed best, without truly considering my own feelings or desires. The thought of living in an annex, separate from my home, felt like a quiet stripping away of my independence, a symbolic severing of my connection to the life Robert and I had built. It was not about making my life easier. It was about making their lives easier, about managing me in a way that fit their vision of my aging years. The illusion of complete understanding and unwavering support within my family began to shatter. I realized that their perception of me had shifted, colored by assumptions about my age and abilities that did not align with my own reality. They saw a woman who needed to be cared for, while I still felt like a woman capable of living her life on her own terms. The pain of this realization was profound. It was not just the disappointment of discovering their hidden plans, but the deeper hurt of feeling misunderstood, of being seen as less than I was. The trust I had placed in their understanding of me felt subtly eroded. I thought about all the times I had readily offered my support, my home, my time, without question or reservation. The thought that they would make such a significant decision about my life without my genuine consent felt like a profound imbalance in our relationship. The comfortable narrative I had always held about my place in the family, the unwavering bond of love and mutual respect, felt suddenly fragile. The image of the close-knit family I cherished had been subtly fractured by the revelation of their unilateral planning. I spent hours alone, grappling with this new understanding. The familiar comfort of my home now felt tinged with a sense of unease, a reminder of the potential changes that had been contemplated without my knowledge. The silence in the house was no longer peaceful. It was filled with the echoes of unspoken assumptions and the weight of my disappointment. I felt a profound sense of sadness, a mourning for the uncomplicated trust we once shared. But amidst the pain, a flicker of something else began to ignite within me. It was a quiet resolve, a growing determination to reclaim my own narrative, to assert my own desires and capabilities. The shattering of illusions, though painful, also brought a new clarity. I could no longer pretend that everything was as it seemed. I needed to face this new reality and decide how I wanted to move forward. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was becoming increasingly clear. I needed to take control of my own future, to ensure that my voice was heard and my choices were respected. The time for quiet acceptance was over. The time for asserting my own strength had arrived. The weight of the shattered illusions pressed down on me, making the familiar comfort of my home feel like a gilded cage. The thought of a future dictated by assumptions and well-intentioned but ultimately unwanted plans became unbearable. I knew, with a certainty that resonated deep within my soul, that I needed to create some distance, to choose my own path forward. The decision was not made lightly. It was born out of a deep need to reclaim my autonomy, to honor the woman I still felt myself to be. It was a difficult and painful choice, one that involved stepping away, at least temporarily, from the close proximity of my family. I thought about Robert. He had always encouraged my independence, my spirit of adventure. I imagined him nodding in approval, understanding my need to assert myself. I started making quiet preparations. I contacted a local estate agent, a kind woman named Sarah who understood my desire for discretion. I began sorting through my belongings, deciding what I wanted to keep, what I might need in a new space. It was a slow and deliberate process, each item carrying memories, each decision a small step towards an unknown future. When I finally told Thomas and Rebecca of my decision to move, they were taken aback. Their initial reaction was a mixture of disbelief and hurt. "Mum, you cannot be serious," Thomas said, his voice filled with concern. "Where would you go? You have lived here for so long." "I am serious," I replied calmly but firmly. "I need to create some space for myself, a place where my decisions are solely my own." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. "But Mum, we just want you to be near us, where we can help you." "And I appreciate that, Rebecca," I said softly. "But I need to feel like I am living my own life, on my own terms." The thought of living in an annex, however well-intentioned, felt like a diminishment of that. The conversation was difficult, filled with their protests and my quiet but unwavering resolve. They struggled to understand my need for independence, perhaps still viewing me through the lens of their preconceived notions. But I stood firm. I explained that this was not about rejecting their love or their concern, but about honoring my own needs and my own sense of self-worth. I needed to prove to myself, and perhaps to them, that I was still capable, still vibrant, still in control of my own destiny. The act of walking away, of choosing a path that diverged from their expectations, was both liberating and painful. There was a sense of sadness in leaving the home that held so many memories, the garden Robert and I had tended together, but there was also a burgeoning sense of excitement, a feeling of stepping into the unknown with a renewed sense of purpose. The first step from the shadows of their assumptions was a solitary one, but it was a step taken with a quiet determination. I was choosing myself, my own needs, my own future. And in that choice, I began to feel a flicker of the strength I had almost forgotten I possessed. Even as I took those first steps towards creating my own space, the pain of the broken trust lingered. The realization that my own children had been making significant plans for my life without my genuine input left a deep ache in my heart. The far echoes of their well-intentioned but ultimately misguided assumptions about my capabilities continued to resonate in my thoughts. I would find myself replaying our conversations, the subtle hints and evasive answers, and a wave of sadness would wash over me. It was not just the plan itself, the idea of the annex, that hurt. It was the underlying message it conveyed. That they saw me as someone whose independence was waning, someone who needed to be managed and cared for in a way that fit their vision, not mine. The trust that had formed the bedrock of our family relationships felt subtly fractured. I found myself questioning their motives, wondering if their concern had been entirely selfless, or if there had been an element of practicality, of wanting to simplify their own lives. Memories of happier times, of the easy camaraderie and open communication we once shared, now felt tinged with a bittersweet sadness. Had I been blind to these subtle shifts in their perception of me? Had I unknowingly allowed them to define my aging years? The pain was a constant companion, a dull ache that accompanied me through my days. It made the process of finding a new home and sorting through my belongings feel heavier, each task tinged with a sense of loss. I missed the easy intimacy we once shared, the unspoken understanding that transcended age and assumptions. The thought of building a new life without that familiar closeness felt daunting, a solitary endeavor undertaken with a heavy heart. I knew that healing would take time, that the pain of feeling misunderstood and having my autonomy subtly undermined would not disappear overnight. There were moments when I doubted my decision to move, when the comfort of the familiar, despite its underlying issues, seemed preferable to the uncertainty of the future. But then, the memory of their evasiveness, the realization of their hidden plans would resurface, strengthening my resolve. I knew that for my own well-being, for the sake of reclaiming my sense of self, I needed this space, this opportunity to redefine my own life on my own terms. The pain stayed, a reminder of the broken trust, but it also served as a catalyst. It fueled my determination to build a future where my voice was heard, my choices were respected, and my independence was fiercely guarded. The echoes of the past were a somber melody, but beneath them, a new rhythm of self-reliance and quiet strength was beginning to emerge. In the quiet solitude of packing and preparing to move, I found myself surrounded by ghosts, the tangible remnants of happier times that now evoked a bittersweet ache in my heart. Old photographs scattered across tabletops captured moments of unadulterated joy. Thomas and Rebecca as bright-eyed children, Robert's arm around my shoulder, our family gathered around holiday tables, laughter echoing in the background. These images were a poignant reminder of the deep love and connection we had once shared, a stark contrast to the subtle fractures that had recently emerged. I held a faded photograph of Robert and me on our honeymoon, our faces radiant with the promise of a shared future. The dreams we had held then, the adventures we had planned, now felt like distant echoes, tinged with the sadness of what had been lost. As I sorted through boxes of old toys and school projects belonging to Thomas and Rebecca, memories flooded, back of their childhoods, the countless hours I had spent nurturing and supporting them. The thought that they might now see me as a burden, someone to be managed, felt like a painful betrayal of those years of unconditional love. The house itself held countless memories. The scuff marks on the hallway wall where Thomas had learned to ride his bicycle, the height chart in the kitchen doorway marking their growth, the cozy corner in the living room where I had read them bedtime stories. Every nook and cranny, whispered tales of a shared past. Walking through the empty rooms, I could almost hear the echoes of their laughter, the murmur of our conversations, the comforting rhythm of our family life. The silence that now pervaded the house felt heavy, a stark reminder of the distance that had grown between us. I missed the easy intimacy of those happier times, the unspoken understanding that had once flowed so freely between us. I longed for the days when their gazes were filled with unadulterated affection and respect, not tinged with pity or concern about my perceived limitations. The ghosts of those happier times served as a poignant reminder of what had been lost, of the uncomplicated love and trust that had been subtly eroded by unspoken assumptions and hidden plans. They fueled a deep sadness, a longing for the way things used to be. But amidst the melancholy, there was also a quiet resolve. The memories of those strong, loving connections also reminded me of the inherent goodness within my children, the possibility of reconciliation and a renewed understanding. The past, though tinged with sadness, also held the promise of a future where our relationships could be rebuilt on a foundation of honesty and mutual respect. The ghosts of happier times were a reminder of the love that still existed, however obscured it might currently be. And it was that love, that enduring bond, that gave me a glimmer of hope for the future, a belief that even after the pain and the broken trust, healing and understanding might still be possible. In the midst of the emotional upheaval and the practicalities of moving, I reached out to Martha. Her steady presence and unwavering support had always been a source of comfort, and I knew I needed her now more than ever. We met for tea at a small cafe, the familiar warmth of her company a soothing balm to my troubled spirit. I poured out my heart to her, sharing the details of my confrontation with Thomas and Rebecca, the pain of their hidden plans, and my decision to move. Martha listened intently, her eyes filled with empathy and understanding. She did not offer platitudes or try to minimize my feelings. Instead, she validated my hurt and acknowledged the difficult position I was in. "Eleanor, dear," she said softly, her hand resting gently on mine, "you are absolutely right to prioritize your own needs and your own sense of independence. Their intentions may have been good, but their actions were misguided and disrespectful of your autonomy." Her words were like a lifeline, a confirmation that my feelings were valid and my decision was sound. In the darkness of my confusion and hurt, her understanding was a welcome light. We talked for hours. I shared my sadness about the broken trust, my longing for the uncomplicated love we once shared. Martha recounted her own experiences with well-meaning but overbearing family members, offering a perspective that helped me feel less alone in my struggle. She reminded me of my own strength and resilience, the quiet determination that had carried me through difficult times in the past, including the loss of Robert. She encouraged me to embrace this new chapter, to see it as an opportunity for growth and self-discovery. "This is not about creating distance out of anger, Eleanor," she said, wisely. "It is about creating space for yourself, space where you can define your own life and your own happiness. Sometimes we need to step back in order to move forward." Her support was unwavering, her belief in my strength a powerful affirmation. In sharing my burden with her, the weight on my heart felt a little lighter. The isolation I had been feeling began to dissipate, replaced by the comforting knowledge that I was not alone in this journey. Martha also offered practical help, suggesting resources for finding a new home and offering to assist with the move itself. Her friendship was a tangible act of kindness. A hand reached out in the darkness of my emotional turmoil. Leaving the cafe that afternoon, I felt a sense of renewed strength and hope. Martha's understanding and support had been a vital source of comfort and validation. The path ahead still held uncertainty, but I no longer felt like I was walking it entirely alone. The bond of our long friendship had proven to be a steadfast anchor in the midst of the storm, a reminder that even in times of familial conflict, the love and support of true friends can provide a much-needed source of light and strength. The process of moving was more than just packing boxes and transporting furniture. It was a symbolic act of releasing what no longer served me, both physically and emotionally. As I sorted through my belongings, I made conscious decisions about what to take with me and what to leave behind. Old photographs that evoked too much sadness, mementos that tied me too tightly to a past that had shifted. These were gently placed in boxes destined for donation. The house itself, the walls, that held so many memories, became a symbol of a chapter closing. Walking through the empty rooms for the final time, I allowed myself a moment of quiet reflection, acknowledging the joy and love that had filled those spaces, but also recognizing the need to move forward. Saying goodbye to the garden Robert and I had created together was particularly poignant. The roses he had planted, the herbs we had tended, the quiet corners where we had shared countless conversations. They held the essence of our life together. But even in that farewell, there was a sense of peace, a knowing that the memories would live on within me, regardless of my physical location. The act of handing over the keys to Sarah, the estate agent, felt like a tangible release. It was a letting go of the physical space that had become intertwined with the recent emotional turmoil. As I walked away from the house for the final time, I carried with me the lessons learned, the strength gained, and the resolve to create a new space filled with my own intentions and desires. This process of releasing extended beyond the physical. I also made a conscious effort to let go of the anger and resentment I had felt towards Thomas and Rebecca. While the pain of their actions was still present, I recognized that holding on to negativity would only hinder my own healing and progress. Forgiveness, I realized, was not necessarily about condoning their behavior, but about freeing myself from the burden of bitterness. It was a gradual process, a gentle untangling of the emotions that had been binding me. I also began to release the expectations I had held about my role in the family, the assumptions I had made about their understanding of me. The shattering of those illusions, though painful, had also created space for a new, more authentic understanding of our relationships. Saying goodbye to what no longer served me was an act of self-care, a conscious choice to prioritize my own emotional well-being. It was about creating space for new beginnings, for a future defined by my own choices and desires, rather than the well-intentioned but ultimately limiting plans of others. It was a quiet but powerful declaration of my own agency, a reclaiming of my own narrative. My new apartment was small, but filled with light. It overlooked a quiet park, and the gentle rustling of leaves in the breeze was a soothing soundtrack to my days. For the first time in a long time, I was truly alone, and the initial feeling was a strange mix of vulnerability and exhilarating freedom. The silence in this new space was different from the silence in my old house. It was not filled with the echoes of shared memories or the weight of unspoken anxieties. It was a quiet stillness, a blank canvas upon which I could paint my own future. There were moments of loneliness, especially in the evenings. The absence of Robert's familiar presence was keenly felt, and the lack of the casual comings and goings of my children and grandchildren created a void. But this solitude was also different. It was not the isolation of feeling misunderstood, or sidelined. It was a chosen solitude, a space for quiet reflection and self-discovery. I began to find a rhythm in my new life. I established new routines, dictated solely by my own desires. I woke when I chose, ate when I was hungry, and spent my days pursuing interests that had been quietly simmering on the back burner for years. I rediscovered my love for painting, filling canvases with vibrant colors and abstract shapes that reflected the emotions I had been processing. I joined a book club at the local library, engaging in stimulating conversations with new acquaintances. I took long walks in the park, feeling the sun on my face and the earth beneath my feet, connecting with the simple beauty of nature. In this solitude, I began to discover a quiet strength I had not realized I possessed. Without the familiar roles and expectations of family life constantly shaping my days, I had the space to reconnect with my own inner voice, to listen to my own needs and desires. I learned to find comfort in my own company. The evenings, once filled with a sense of longing, became opportunities for quiet contemplation, for reading and journaling, for simply being present with my own thoughts and feelings. This solitude was not a withdrawal from life. It was an immersion into myself. It was a time for healing, for self-nurturing, for rediscovering the passions and interests that made me feel truly alive. I realized that being alone did not necessarily equate to being lonely. Loneliness was a state of feeling disconnected, even in the presence of others. Solitude, on the other hand, could be a powerful source of strength and self-awareness, a space where one could reconnect with their own inner core. In the quiet of my new apartment, surrounded by my own choices and my own rhythms, I began to understand the profound difference. I was alone, yes, but I was also finding a deep and abiding connection with myself. And in that connection, I discovered a quiet strength, a resilience that had been there all along, waiting for the space to bloom. As the weeks turned into months in my new life, I began to recognize the subtle but profound ways in which the recent experiences had changed me. The pain of the broken trust, the challenge of asserting my independence, the journey of self-discovery, in solitude. They had all left their mark, not as wounds that continued to fester, but as scars that spoke of resilience and growth. I was no longer the same woman who had quietly accepted the well-intentioned but ultimately limiting assumptions of her children. I had found my voice, learned to articulate my needs and desires with a newfound clarity and conviction. The fear of disappointing others, of disrupting the perceived harmony, had lessened, replaced by a stronger sense of self-worth and a deeper understanding of my own boundaries. The experience had also brought a new layer of wisdom. I had learned that love, even the deepest familial love, could sometimes be expressed in ways that inadvertently diminished another person's autonomy. I had come to understand the importance of open and honest communication, of ensuring that assumptions were voiced and expectations were mutually understood. The pain of feeling misunderstood had also cultivated a greater empathy within me. I became more attuned to the subtle cues of others, more aware of the importance of truly listening and seeing people for who they were, rather than projecting my own assumptions onto them. My solitude had fostered a deeper sense of self-reliance. I had learned to navigate the practicalities of daily life on my own, to find solutions to challenges without relying on the immediate support of my family. This newfound independence brought with it a quiet confidence, a belief in my own capabilities that had perhaps been subtly undermined over the years. I was not bitter about what had happened. The pain had been real, but it had also been a catalyst for growth. The scars I carried were not a source of shame or resentment. but rather a testament to my ability to weather difficult storms and emerge stronger on the other side. I looked at my reflection and saw a woman with lines etched around, her eyes that told a richer, more complex story. There was a quiet strength in my gaze, a sense of self-possession that had perhaps been less evident before. I had been forged in the fire of emotional challenge, and the result was not a broken or hardened spirit, but a more resilient and understanding one. I was not the same, and in many ways, I was grateful for the transformation. The wisdom born of those difficult experiences had enriched my life, providing a deeper understanding of myself and the complexities of human relationships. One crisp autumn afternoon, as I was browsing in a small antique shop near my apartment, I stumbled upon a beautiful watercolor painting. It depicted a vibrant landscape of rolling hills and a sparkling turquoise sea, bathed in the warm glow of a setting sun. It was a scene that evoked a sense of peace and boundless possibility. Something about the painting resonated deeply within me. It reminded me of the travel brochures Thomas and Rebecca had shown me, the ones featuring the Maldives resort. But this image felt different. It was not just a picture of a beautiful place. It was an invitation, a whisper of adventures yet to be had. Without hesitation, I bought the painting. I hung it in my living room, where the afternoon sun would catch its colors, and every time I looked at it, a small spark of something akin to hope flickered within me. It was a quiet hope, tentative and fragile, but it was there nonetheless. It was the realization that my world did not have to shrink, that my horizons were not limited by the assumptions of others, or the passage of time. The painting served as a visual reminder that beauty and new experiences were still within my reach. Around the same time, I received a letter from Lily. It was a simple, childlike drawing of a woman with gray hair standing on a sunny beach, holding hands with two smaller figures. "Grandma," she had written in her wobbly print, "I miss you. Maybe we can all go to the sunny place one day." Her innocent words touched me deeply. They were a reminder of the genuine love that still existed within my family, untainted by the complexities of adult assumptions and plans. Lily's simple expression of longing was a small bridge across the distance that had grown. Then, at my book club, I met a woman named Carol. She was a vibrant and adventurous spirit in her late 70s who had recently returned from a solo trip to Southeast Asia. Her stories of exploring ancient temples and bustling markets ignited a sense of excitement within me. She spoke of the freedom of traveling alone, of setting her own pace and discovering hidden gems off the beaten path. Carol's enthusiasm was infectious, and her experiences shattered any remaining preconceived notions I had about the limitations of age. She was living proof that adventure and discovery were not confined to the young. These small moments, the evocative painting, Lily's heartfelt letter, Carol's inspiring stories, were like tiny lights illuminating the path ahead. They offered a glimpse of a future filled with possibility, a future where my own desires and dreams still held weight. The darkness of the broken trust and the pain of feeling misunderstood had begun to recede, replaced by these gentle glimmers of hope. They were a reminder that even after a period of darkness, light could still emerge, offering the promise of new beginnings and undiscovered joys. The small lights of hope began to illuminate a path forward, a path where I was the author of my own story. I felt a renewed sense of purpose, a quiet determination to weave a new chapter in my life, one filled with my own choices and aspirations. The first step was to make my new apartment truly my own. I filled it with things I loved, my paintings, my books, the photographs of Robert that brought comfort without sadness. I created a small balcony garden, nurturing new life in pots and planters, a symbolic act of growth and renewal. I started exploring my new neighborhood, discovering hidden cafes, charming boutiques, and a vibrant community center that offered a variety of classes and activities. I signed up for a watercolor painting class, eager to rekindle my passion and connect with like-minded individuals. I also began to address my physical well-being. I joined a gentle yoga class, finding a sense of peace and strength in the slow, deliberate movements. I started taking longer walks in the park, enjoying the beauty of the changing seasons and the invigorating feeling of movement. These were small, deliberate steps, acts of self-care and self-discovery. I was nurturing myself, tending to my own needs and desires in a way that had perhaps taken a back seat to the demands of family life for many years. I also began to reconnect with old friends, scheduling regular lunches and phone calls, rediscovering the joy of shared laughter and familiar companionship. These connections reminded me that my life was rich and full, even outside the immediate circle of my family. Slowly but surely, a new rhythm began to emerge in my days. It was a rhythm dictated by my own internal compass, guided by my own interests and passions. I was no longer living a life defined by the expectations or assumptions of others. I was creating a life that felt authentically mine. This process of beginning again was not about forgetting the past or erasing the pain. It was about integrating those experiences into the fabric of my life, learning from them, and moving forward with a greater sense of self-awareness and resilience. I was like a gardener tending a new plot of land. The soil might still hold traces of past seasons, but I was planting new seeds, nurturing new growth, and creating a space that would blossom in its own unique way. The weaving of this new chapter was a solitary endeavor in many ways, but it was also deeply empowering. With each small step, I felt a stronger sense of self-reliance and a growing excitement for the possibilities that lay ahead. I was not just surviving, I was thriving on my own terms. Just as I was beginning to settle into the comforting rhythm of my new life, the past came knocking at my door. It started with more frequent phone calls from Thomas, his tone softer, more solicitous than it had been in recent times. He would ask about my day, my activities, his voice laced with a concern that felt both genuine and a little hesitant. Then, Rebecca started sending me small gifts, a beautiful scarf she had seen and thought I would like, a new book by my favorite author. Each gesture felt like a tentative olive branch, an attempt to bridge the distance that had grown between us. One Sunday afternoon, Thomas and Rebecca arrived at my apartment with Noah and Lily. It was an unexpected visit, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of unease. Had they come to try and persuade me to return? But their demeanor was different. They were respectful of my space, their tone gentle and apologetic. Noah and Lily rushed to hug me, their innocent affection a balm to my heart. "Grandma, we miss you," Lily said, her small hand clutching mine. "I miss you too, my sweet girl," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. Thomas and Rebecca watched us, their expressions a mixture of sadness and regret. They did not try to pressure me to return to my old house or to reconsider my decision to live independently. Instead, they focused on spending quality time with me in my new space. They admired my paintings, listened attentively as I told them about my book club, and even helped me tend to my balcony garden. It felt like a tentative step towards reconciliation, a quiet acknowledgement of my need for autonomy. Over the following weeks, their visits became more regular. They would often bring a meal to share, or simply come by for a cup of tea and a chat. The conversations were still tinged with a certain carefulness, but there was a growing sense of openness and honesty. Thomas admitted that they had perhaps underestimated my strength and my desire for independence. Rebecca confessed that they had been so focused on what they thought was best for me that they had failed to truly listen to what I wanted. Their attempts to reconnect felt genuine, born out of love and a growing understanding of my perspective. It was not about trying to regain control or manipulate me into returning to my old life. It felt like a sincere effort to rebuild our relationship on a foundation of mutual respect and understanding. The past was knocking at my door, not with demands or expectations, but with tentative gestures of reconciliation. It created a new kind of tension within me. Part of me longed for the easy closeness we once shared, while another part was wary of slipping back into old patterns. I had found a sense of peace and self-reliance in my solitude, and I was hesitant to compromise that newfound independence. The question lingered in the air. Could we truly bridge the gap that had formed? Could we rebuild our relationship on a new foundation of honesty and mutual respect, where my autonomy was not just acknowledged, but truly honored? The past was knocking, and I had to decide how to respond. As Thomas and Rebecca continued their gentle attempts to reconnect, I found myself responding in a way that felt both natural and true to the woman I had become. The pain of their earlier actions had not completely vanished, but it had softened, replaced by a clearer understanding of their intentions, however misguided they may have been. I welcomed their visits, cherishing the time spent with Noah and Lily, whose innocent love was a constant source of joy. I engaged in conversations with Thomas and Rebecca, listening to their reflections and sharing my own experiences in my new life. But I also maintained clear boundaries. I made it clear that while I valued their love and concern, my decision to live independently was not negotiable. My new apartment was my sanctuary, a space where I felt in control and at peace, and I was not ready to relinquish that. When they occasionally slipped back into old habits, offering unsolicited advice or making assumptions about my capabilities, I addressed it gently but firmly. "I appreciate your concern," I would say, "but I am managing well on my own. I will reach out if I need help." My responses were not born out of anger or resentment, but from a place of self-awareness and a deep understanding of my own needs. I had learned the importance of asserting my boundaries, not as a way to create distance, but as a way to protect my own well-being and maintain the integrity of my new life. I could see that they were trying to understand, to adjust their perceptions of me. They were learning to see me not just as their aging mother, but as an independent woman with her own desires and capabilities. There were moments of genuine connection, moments where the old warmth and understanding seemed to flicker back to life. We talked about things other than my living arrangements, sharing stories and laughter, rebuilding the threads of our relationship on a more equal footing. I offered forgiveness, not in a grand gesture, but in small, everyday interactions. I acknowledged their remorse and their efforts to make amends. But forgiveness did not mean forgetting the past or abandoning the lessons I had learned. It meant releasing the bitterness and moving forward with a heart that was open, but also guarded by the wisdom of experience. My responses to their attempts to return were guided by a newfound sense of self-respect. I valued their love, but I valued my own autonomy even more. I was willing to rebuild our relationship, but it had to be on terms that honored my independence and acknowledged the woman I had become. a woman who knew her own worth and was capable of making her own choices. As time went on, the initial tension in my interactions with Thomas and Rebecca gradually eased. They seemed to have truly accepted my decision to live independently, their visits becoming less about reconciliation and more about genuine connection. Continued to nurture my new life, finding joy and fulfillment in my painting, my book club, my walks in the park, and the quiet solitude of my apartment. I had created a space where I felt truly myself, where my days were dictated by my own desires and rhythms. There were still moments when I missed the easy familiarity of my old life, the constant presence of my family, but those moments were now tinged with a sense of gratitude for the growth and self-discovery that had come from stepping away. One afternoon, as I sat on my balcony, surrounded by the vibrant colors of my potted flowers, I realized something profound. I had finally, truly, chosen myself. It was not a dramatic act of defiance, but a quiet, internal shift. It was the acceptance of my own needs and desires as paramount, the understanding that my happiness and well-being were not dependent on the approval or expectations of others. This act of choosing myself was not selfish. It was an act of self-love. It was about honoring the woman I was, with all her strengths and vulnerabilities, her longings and her boundaries. It was about creating a life that felt authentic and fulfilling, regardless of societal expectations or familial assumptions about how I should be living at my age. The quiet victory of self-love was not about winning a battle against my family, but about winning a personal battle for my own sense of worth and autonomy. It was about reclaiming my narrative, rewriting the story of my aging years on my own terms. In choosing myself, I had found a deep and abiding peace. The anxiety and uncertainty that had plagued me in the past had receded, replaced by a quiet confidence and a sense of inner harmony. I still loved my family, deeply and unconditionally, but that love now existed within the framework of mutual respect and a clear understanding of my boundaries. I could be a loving mother and grandmother without sacrificing my own independence or my own sense of self. The journey had been challenging, filled with pain and difficult decisions, but it had also been transformative. I had discovered a strength I never knew I possessed, a resilience that had been waiting to be awakened. And in choosing myself, I had found not just solitude, but a profound connection with the woman I truly was, a woman who was vibrant, capable, and deserving of a life lived on her own terms. The days that followed were imbued with a newfound serenity. The constant hum of anxiety that had once underscored my life had faded, replaced by a quiet sense of peace and acceptance. My new apartment felt like a true sanctuary, a space where I could simply be myself, without the weight of unspoken expectations or the need to navigate complex familial dynamics. The mornings began with a gentle light filtering through my window, illuminating the vibrant colors of my paintings and the lush greenery of my balcony garden. I would sit with my tea, watching the city awaken, feeling a sense of calm detachment, yet also a deep connection to the world around me. The activities of my days unfolded with a natural rhythm, guided by my own interests and energy levels. I painted when inspiration struck, lost myself in the pages of a captivating book, or enjoyed leisurely walks in the park, savoring the beauty of each season. My interactions with Thomas and Rebecca continued to evolve. Our conversations were more open, more honest, and less fraught with underlying tensions. They seemed to have genuinely embraced my independence, their visits now characterized by a relaxed and respectful camaraderie. The focus was on shared moments and genuine connection, rather than on trying to influence my living arrangements. Even the memories of the pain I had experienced began to soften around the edges. They were no longer sharp and raw, but rather like faded photographs, a reminder of a difficult chapter that I had successfully navigated. I looked back not with bitterness, but with a sense of quiet triumph, a recognition of my own resilience. There were moments, watching Noah and Lily play in my apartment, their laughter filling the air, when I felt a deep sense of gratitude. Despite the challenges we had faced, our family bond had not broken. It had simply been reshaped, reformed on a foundation of greater understanding and mutual respect. The serenity I felt was not the absence of emotion, but rather a deep acceptance of the ebb and flow of life. I understood that challenges were inevitable, but that my own inner strength and my ability to choose my response were what truly mattered. I smiled, not because I forgot, but because I survived and found my way to the light. The darkness had been a difficult passage, but it had ultimately led me to a place of greater self-awareness and a profound appreciation for the simple joys of my own independent life. A new day had truly dawned, filled with the quiet serenity of survival and the gentle promise of continued growth. As I settled deeper into the rhythm of my independent life, a profound sense of gratitude began to bloom within me. It was not just gratitude for the peace and tranquility I had found, but a deeper appreciation for the entire journey, with all its challenges and triumphs. I found myself thankful for the initial unease, the subtle feeling that something was amiss. It had been the first stirring of my intuition, a gentle nudge that something needed to change. I was grateful for Martha's unwavering friendship and her timely warning. Her support had been a lifeline during a period of confusion and uncertainty, validating my feelings and strengthening my resolve. Even the pain of the broken trust held a strange sort of value. It had forced me to confront uncomfortable truths about my relationships and to reevaluate my own needs and boundaries. It had been a catalyst for growth, pushing me to step outside my comfort zone and reclaim my own narrative. I was thankful for the solitude I had found in my new apartment. It had provided the space for introspection, for reconnecting with my own inner voice, and rediscovering passions that had long been dormant. I felt a deep gratitude for Noah and Lily's innocent love, which had served as a constant reminder of the enduring bonds of family. Their simple affection had been a balm to my heart during difficult times. And yes, even for Thomas and Rebecca, I felt a measure of gratitude. Their well-intentioned but ultimately misguided actions had inadvertently set me on a path of self-discovery and empowerment. Their efforts to understand and respect my independence, however belated, were a testament to the enduring power of familial love. I was thankful for the small moments of hope, the evocative painting, Lily's heartfelt letter, Carol's inspiring stories, which had illuminated the way forward during a period of darkness. The journey had been challenging, but it had also been transformative. I had learned invaluable lessons about self-worth, boundaries, and the importance of honoring one's own truth. I had discovered a strength and resilience I never knew I possessed. Saying thank you was not about condoning past hurts or pretending that the journey had been easy. It was about acknowledging the growth that had come from the challenges, the wisdom that had been gained through adversity. It was about recognizing the silver linings, the unexpected blessings that had emerged from a difficult situation. I was grateful for the woman I had become, a woman who was stronger, more self-aware, and more deeply connected to her own inner voice. The journey had been long and winding, but it had ultimately led me to a place of greater peace and a profound appreciation for the richness and complexity of life. As I reflected on the journey, I realized there was one final act of release that needed to take place: the act of forgiving myself. For a long time, I had carried a subtle burden of guilt, a quiet questioning of my own role in the unfolding events. Had I been too passive? Had I allowed myself to be subtly sidelined? Had I not asserted my needs and boundaries clearly enough? These questions would sometimes surface in the quiet moments, whispers of self-doubt that clouded my peace. But as I looked back with the clarity of time and distance, I began to see things differently. I had acted with love and trust, the cornerstones of my relationships. I had believed in the good intentions of my children, even when the signs suggested otherwise. My initial reluctance to confront them had stemmed from a desire to maintain harmony, a fear of disrupting the familiar patterns of our family life. My quiet acceptance of their well-meaning suggestions had not been a sign of weakness, but rather a reflection of my trusting nature and my desire to be a supportive mother. I had operated within the framework of the relationships as I understood them at the time. The realization that their perceptions of me had shifted was not my fault. It was a reflection of their own assumptions and perhaps a lack of open communication. I could not be held responsible for their internal beliefs or their unilateral planning. The journey of reclaiming my independence had been about learning to honor my own needs and boundaries, a process that sometimes takes time and difficult experiences to fully understand. I had emerged from the challenge stronger and more self-aware. Holding on to self-blame served no purpose. It only weighed me down, preventing me from fully embracing the peace and joy I had found. Forgiveness, I realized, needed to extend inward as well. I made a conscious decision to release the burdens of the past, the what-ifs, and the quiet self-recriminations. I acknowledged that I had done the best I could with the knowledge and understanding I had at the time. Forgiving myself was an act of self-compassion, a gentle acknowledgement of my own humanity and my own journey of growth. It was about accepting my past choices, learning from them, and moving forward with a clean slate, free from the lingering weight of self-doubt. In setting my spirit free from yesterday's chains of self-blame, I felt a lightness descend upon me, a final layer of burden lifted. I could now fully embrace the present and look towards the future with a sense of peace and self-acceptance, knowing that I had navigated a difficult path with courage and resilience, and that I deserved the happiness I had found. With the final act of self-forgiveness, a profound sense of freedom washed over me. It was not just the freedom of living independently, but a deeper, more internal liberation, a release from the emotional baggage of the past, and a full embrace of the present moment. One sunny morning, I decided to take a spontaneous trip to the coast, a place I had always loved but had not visited in years. The drive was exhilarating, the wind in my hair a tangible symbol of my newfound liberation. When I arrived, I walked barefoot on the cool, damp sand, feeling the rhythmic ebb and flow of the waves beneath my feet. The vast expanse of the ocean stretched out before me, mirroring the boundless possibilities that now felt open in my own life. I spent the day exploring hidden coves, collecting seashells, and simply breathing in the salty air. There was a lightness in my step, a joy in the simple act of being present in my own experience, without the filter of others' expectations. That evening, I found myself dancing in my living room to an old song Robert and I used to love. Music filled the small space, and I moved freely, without self-consciousness, celebrating the vibrant spirit that still resided within me. The freedom I felt was not just about physical independence. It was about the liberation of my spirit. It was about giving myself permission to pursue my own joys, to embrace my own desires, and to live my life on my own terms, without apology or explanation. I realized that the perceived limitations of age were just that, perceptions. My own inner vitality and my willingness to embrace new experiences were the only true measures of what was possible. The expanse of my own life stretched out before me, filled with untold possibilities and undiscovered joys. I felt a sense of excitement for the future, a quiet confidence in my ability to navigate whatever lay ahead. The journey had led me to this moment of profound liberation, a moment where I could truly say, I am free. Free from the weight of others' expectations, free from the burdens of the past, and free to embrace the fullness and richness of my own independent life. I was dancing in my own sunlight, breathing my own air, and the feeling was exhilarating. Through the challenges and the triumphs of the past months, I had journeyed inward, peeling back layers of expectation and assumption to reveal the unshakable core of who I truly was. I knew now that my worth was not defined by my age or my role within my family. It was inherent, an intrinsic part of my being. I was a woman with a lifetime of experiences, wisdom gleaned from both joy and sorrow, and a spirit that remained vibrant and resilient. I understood that vulnerability was not a weakness but a strength. It was in acknowledging my pain and allowing myself to feel it that I had been able to heal and grow. I had learned the importance of setting boundaries, not as a way to push others away, but as a way to honor and protect my own well-being. I knew that true love and respect involved acknowledging and honoring those boundaries. I embraced my independence, not as a rejection of connection, but as an affirmation of my own capabilities. I found strength in my solitude and joy in my own company. I accepted my past, not with regret, but with gratitude for the lessons it had taught me. It was a part of my story, a chapter that had shaped me into the woman I was today. I knew that my journey was not over, that there would be new challenges and new joys ahead, but I faced the future with a quiet confidence, rooted in the unshakable knowledge of who I was and what I was capable of. The storms of the past had not broken me. They had strengthened me. They had revealed a resilience I never knew I possessed, a deep wellspring of inner strength that could weather any future challenges. I stood rooted in myself, grounded in my own truth, reaching for the sky with a renewed sense of possibility. I knew who I was, a woman who had faced adversity with courage, embraced change with grace, and emerged with an unshakable sense of self-worth. And that knowledge was my greatest strength. If my story has resonated with you, if you have ever felt the subtle sting of being underestimated or the quiet struggle of reclaiming your own voice, then know this: you are not alone. Life has a way of presenting us with unexpected challenges, of testing our resilience and pushing us to redefine ourselves. There will be times when the assumptions of others threaten to dim your light, when the path ahead seems uncertain and daunting, but within you lies an unshakable core of strength, a wellspring of resilience that you may not even realize is there. Trust your intuition, that quiet voice within that whispers your truth. Do not allow the perceptions of others to define your capabilities or limit your horizons. Embrace your journey with all its twists and turns. The challenges you face can become the catalyst for profound growth and self-discovery. Allow yourself to feel the pain, but do not let it consume you. Seek support from trusted friends, and remember that vulnerability is a strength, not a weakness. Learn to set boundaries, to honor your own needs and desires. Your well-being is paramount. Do not be afraid to step back, to create space for yourself, if that is what you need to heal and to grow. And most importantly, never underestimate your own worth. Your value is inherent, independent of your age, your circumstances, or the opinions of others. Embrace the wisdom that comes with experience, and never stop believing in your own potential for joy, for growth, and for new beginnings. The path to reclaiming your own narrative may not always be easy, but it is a journey worth taking. Trust in your own strength, listen to your own voice, and never let anyone else write your story for you. Your light is unique and valuable. Let it shine brightly for the world to see. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope that by sharing my journey, I have offered a glimmer of hope and a reminder of the strength that resides within each of us. Remember, no matter what challenges you may face, you have the power to choose your own path and to define your own future. Embrace your own light and let it guide you.